Self-leadership requires us to actually step back from our thinking and feeling and go, well, is that my thinking and feeling? And that's where self comes in. They really need to step into the driver's seat of their own life. Just recognizing, what is it that's really important to me is a journey. It's an iteration. It does change a little bit over time. Understanding who you are, your authenticity, finding your own voice is a process. Live your journey, run your race. Stop comparing yourself with other people because you don't know what they're dealing with.
Welcome back to our show, Empower Your Life. I'm your host, 𝗠𝘀𝘀𝗻𝗓. Our next guest is a highly respected global expert in self-leadership. He coaches executive teams and the author of the New Leadership Playbook. He speaks on leadership in an AI-driven world. He teaches about self-leadership, that it means taking responsibility for your actions and results without excuses. I love that. His work also influenced leaders worldwide, proving that, listen to this, to lead others, you must lead yourself first. That is why on today's episode, we're going to dive deeper into mastering self-leadership, your journey to success and winning in life with none other than Mr. Andrew Bryant. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, 𝗠𝘀𝘀𝗻𝗓.
Thank you. So let's get started, shall we?
Sure. Fire away. What do you want to know?
Yes. So on our show, Andrew, I love always hearing about the humble beginnings of our guests' stories because it really gives us a deeper understanding about their successes and winnings in life. So could you share some of your humble beginnings that connect to your journey in self-leadership?
Okay, sure. Well, I was born at a very early age in 1961. 1961 was an auspicious year. John F. Kennedy became the 35th president of the United States. Yuri Gagarin became the first man to circumnavigate the Earth as a Soviet cosmonaut, and my mother gave birth to me. I was born in the United Kingdom, in England, down in the south in Sussex, and I had a fairly normal upbringing, but I started working in my father's hardware store at 10 years old. I was still at school, but every Saturday in school holidays, I worked in Dad's shop and I served customers. And in terms of humility, which for me means grounded, that grounded me in a work ethic. It grounded me in customer service and entrepreneurship, which I think were very important things for me. I didn't follow Dad into his hardware store, although he thought about it. He thought he might like me to follow, but I had planned to do medicine. I was a good science student at my English grammar school. But they merged my boys' grammar school with the girls' high school before my A-levels, and I'll leave it to your audience's imagination to wonder how I was distracted. I did get a place to do physiotherapy, and I studied physiotherapy in London. I graduated in 1982. I worked for a couple of years in hospitals, which taught me about hierarchy. Then I did what most male physios did in those days, and I began working with sports teams. I worked with a First Division soccer club, with Olympic athletes, and even a ballet company. And that began my curiosity in human performance. As a physiotherapist, I'm very grateful. It's very pragmatic science. It's about, it's actually mechanics and levers and anatomy. And it teaches you prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And that motto of don't prescribe until you really understand something, and the importance, therefore, of curiosity and observation. Yes. And that has, with the work ethic, curiosity and observation has really set me up to look at human performance, firstly in sport, and then a segue or a pivot into working with business teams and observing how they worked. And that really set me up. So my humble beginnings framed me or positioned me around curiosity and observation.
Oh, that speaks to me as well. Really interested in curiosity and observation about human behaviors. And leading to self-leadership. I'm sure, Andrew, many people have already asked you many times in many interviews about self-leadership. So my
Sure.
question, what do most people misunderstand about self-leadership? Perhaps they understand the definition of it, but they get challenged of understanding its depth. Am I right? What do you say?
Sure. Yes, because myself and Dr. Anna Kazan published a book in 2000. I'm forgetting my dates today. 2012. Our book, Self-Leadership: How to Become a More Successful, Efficient, and Effective Leader from the Inside Out was published. And in that book, we define self-leadership as a practice, the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So to your question, and it's a good question, what do most people miss? They miss the fact that it's a practice. They miss the fact that, well, hang on a moment, I influence my thoughts, feelings, and actions, therefore I'm a self-leader. Well, not necessarily. I mean, we're all self-leaders up until a point, but it's a matter of scale. The key element is most people miss that we don't have any free will. Psychologists, sociologists, philosophers have recognized for quite some time we have little, if no, free will. We don't choose the time and place of our birth. We don't choose our parents. We don't choose our early upbringing. And so we're framed in terms of our perspective and outlook very early on. And most people don't even challenge that. They follow the football team or the cricket team of their parents and the same religion and political party. And so self-leadership requires us to actually step back from our thinking and feeling and go, well, is that my thinking and feeling? And that's where self comes in. And so most people misunderstand that they really need to step into the driver's seat of their own life. Most of us are driving along as a passenger or as a leaf going down a stream of consciousness that starts from our conception. And so actually grabbing the steering wheel and saying, hang on a moment, this is my life. And I'm having these thoughts, but are they my thoughts or are they cultural thoughts? And do they serve me? And that takes a significant amount of introspection and work to process, who am I? And there's more than one me, because there's the me talking to you, and there's the me with the awareness of me talking to you, and then there's the me with the awareness of the me talking to you. So that, before you become absolutely out of your box and psychotic, just recognizing, what is it that's really important to me is a journey. It's an iteration. It does change a little bit over time. But, this understanding who you are, your authenticity, finding your own voice is a process. And that's what most people miss, that it actually takes effort.
Indeed. I love you mentioned the authenticity, which that this is something that I really advocate. And the practice, I think in my observation, many people would take so much accreditations or programs or everything, reading books, but still the challenge is getting that practice embody in our body, mind, whatever you call it. And I'm super curious just to kind of follow up to that question. People know the word change, but why it's so challenging for people to change so that they can see that the potential is there? What do you think?
Well, that's a $64,000 question. So let's unpack that, right? So, no need to apologize. So, authenticity in itself is misunderstood, right? Because none of us are out of context. So right now I'm in conversation with you. And so that informs the framework of who I am relative to you. And I'll adapt slightly to make this conversation go well towards an outcome. I might change the way I communicate with my best friend or with my wife or with my kids. So am I being a chameleon or am I being authentic? So we tend to show aspects of ourselves to people, and aspects of ourselves come out in context, right? So, really you want to know what somebody's like under pressure. And somebody might be really nice to their boss, but awful to their subordinates, or vice versa, right? But it's generally that way around. So change is, what are we going to change? Are we going to change Our circumstances, I mean, I've lived in a number of countries. I was born in England, then I moved to Australia, and then I moved to Asia, and I'm coming to you today from Portugal. So yeah, I've changed location, but wherever you go, there you are. So have I changed myself? Yes. I jokingly say that I'm version 6.3 of myself, which is a nice way of saying I'm 63 years old. I already shared my date of birth. Anybody did the math, they've worked that out. But version 6.3 doesn't have as much hair as version 4.3, say, but hopefully has a lot more wisdom and compassion. Yes. So, the change is an iteration and an evolution. It's unlikely that people are going to change themselves dramatically. I have a particular bugbear, on the internet, it's always, get out of your comfort zone, right? And you hear motivational speakers say, get out of your comfort zone. Well, I'd actually say psychologically, that's bad advice, because we all have a homeostasis, and physiologically, we can handle a certain amount of percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere. You go too high up a mountain, right? There's not enough oxygen, and you're in a problem. You go too deep in the ocean, the oxygen's too concentrated, and you're out of your comfort zone and you pass out. So we operate within a bandwidth. Psychologically, the same. If you try and change things too dramatically, you're going to fracture yourself. And that's where, we know that experiment. It's called torture. You keep somebody awake for a long period of time and play loud music, and you can fracture their personality. So don't try and change yourself, because you can't, because you're inside yourself. But evolve yourself, develop yourself, choose areas of your life to grow into. So don't get out of your comfort zone, expand your comfort zone. Now, it's a subtlety, but it's an important one, because if we see people come out of development seminars and say, okay, that's it. And I don't mean to slander Tony Robbins, but somebody does 3 days of Tony Robbins and comes out and goes, that's it, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to do something. But if they haven't done the preparation to do something completely different, they can end up broke and somewhat disillusioned. I'm not saying that will happen, but it has happened.
Yes.
So if you go through a catalytic experience, you go off on a retreat and go, I want to be a better person, then create a plan to expand that. And that's the self-leadership. It's the practice of taking action towards your objectives. Set your objectives. So for instance, you want to get fit. So, don't go into the gym and load all the plates on the bar and try and bench press it, because you'll rip a muscle. You're going to, firstly, you might only be able to lift the bar, and then you add some weight. Right? It's a very obvious analogy. And it's the same with your relationships, and it's the same with your finances, and it's the same with every aspect of your life. Set the objective, work out what's required to get there, and then set a plan in action to achieve that objective, and take ownership of that plan. Don't blame anybody else. Don't complain. Accept the setbacks as they come, and move towards the you that you want to be. Yeah. Because we are human beings before we're human doings, before we're human havings. If you want to have the big house and the holidays, well, then you're going to have to do some things to get them. And if you're going to do those things, be the person that does those things.
Wonderful. While I'm listening to what you're saying, the first thing came to mind, the book, which I think I'm sure you would know, Atomic Habits, because everyone can do subtle or tiny step, replacing whatever you currently have as a routine. You can shift to one tiny, whatever. I remember the first time I'm doing my coaching, and she's a young adult in a corporate office. And I said, well, you want to get fit. That's what you said. And I said, okay, let's start and see what your morning routine look like. And then we started, I'm sure you'll hear this before. I said, okay, well, let's practice first of putting your exercise gears next to your bedroom. Just do that for consecutive days and see how it feels. Just do that without doing any exercise. And once you get used to that, your body and your mind get used to that, then add more. And as what you said, expand and add, and then you also started to shift your perspective that, hey, actually I can change it. I can evolve, I can develop. But I think I love when you mention that, yes, getting out of comfort zone, it always scary for many people to hear that. What do you mean by that? No, I'm not comfortable. I'm not going to do that, especially for people who already hold such a huge identity. I think giving that piece of advice or suggestion will be so scary for them. And it's a great thing to point out. Now, Andrew, you mentioned about this shifting, evolving, expanding. My next question to you is that how can someone start bit by bit self-leadership in this AI world-driven world that we are having, where, well, constant comparisons and busy life nonstop that we're living can really feel overwhelming?
Okay, so the first shift in anything is to shift the narrative, right? So there are three elements to self-leadership: self-awareness, knowing what you're saying to yourself and to the world, and then the self-regulation, which you actually articulated as self-regulation. Putting your gym gear by the side of your bed makes it easier to go for an exercise the next day, right? And then the self-learning, which is learning new habits and narratives and moving forwards. So it's essential that you have an objective. You say, okay, here's who I want to become, but what's my narrative now, right? And catching that. I mean, the very first thing that every self-leader does is they get a journal, and I recommend people buy themselves a nice moleskin notebook and just start writing every day.
Like this.
Yeah,
this small.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, it can be small, but write every day and just catch what you're saying to yourself. Just catch that narrative, and then just test that narrative with this phrase. Does this serve me? Does this serve the objective that I've set out, right? And if the narrative is negative, then you reframe that narrative, and you can do that yourself, or you can do it with a coach. And as you begin to reframe that narrative, then you start taking the actions towards your objectives. Now, you mentioned two very important words: comparison and overwhelm. And the narrative is what's going to let you know you're overwhelmed. If everything is just this just catastrophic, permanent, pervasive, and it's all about you, then you are going to feel helpless and overwhelmed. So it's just zeroing in. That's why meditation is so powerful, because at least you have control over the next breath.
Yes.
You can smell the flower, you can blow the candle. So you exercise one piece of control. You handled your breath, right? You took a breath in, you took a breath out, you controlled that. Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, who was a prisoner in a Nazi death camp, said, the last of all human freedoms is the freedom to choose our own attitude regardless of the circumstances. So we can choose to breathe, and we can choose, okay, how do I want to approach this? And just taking the steering wheel, as I said, becoming the driver of your life, and say, well, at least I can choose, how I feel about that. Now, I joked before you pressed record that, are you always this cheerful? And, more power to you. I had to manage my emotions today because my computer got what's called the blue screen of death, and I had to reinstall the software and do the whole thing. And I knew I had this interview and I needed my computer up and running by the time that we'd agreed upon, and I got the job finished 2 minutes before we went to air. Now, if I'd got angry and frustrated and yelled and screamed, I'd have never got the task done. I needed to manage my emotions and my actions towards my objectives, which was to be on this call with you. Simple example. So always don't be overwhelmed. Always bring it back to, what can I control in this moment? And if all you can control is your breath, start there, and then you expand back out again. The second, so that's overwhelm. And comparison, well, the Buddha taught us this, that comparison is the seat of all unhappiness. So just live your journey, run your race. Stop comparing yourself with other people, because you don't know what they're dealing with. And I've been a coach for 25 years, and I've worked with some incredibly successful people who, people look at them and go, God, gee, I'd like to be like them. And I know their struggles and their inner demons because they've shared them with me. And I'm like, Never judge somebody from the outside. Somebody always looks like they're better off than you, but you would not swap your life with theirs if you knew what they were dealing with. So stop with that comparison today. If you're going to do anything, stop comparing yourself. Life's a game of snakes and ladders, or snakes and chutes, as the Americans call it. You roll the dice and you go along, and you might go up a ladder and get a head start, but then you might hit a snake. And that person you're comparing yourself with, you don't know whether they're about to hit a snake or not, and slide back down. So stop looking at them, run your race.
Amazing. Great reminder for those people who needed to hear that. And I just want to add into what you said about this overwhelming and comparison. I think from what I'm hearing, what we're living right now, we're missing of slowing things, stepping back and just process what we're feeling. Because, and it's funny, you mentioned that, am I this cheerful every day? Because that takes practice, right? And for me, what I've learned over time that really helped me where I'm right now is really slowing things down and process, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? What am I getting from this? Or what lesson actually the universe is asking me to learn? Because I think, like what you said, the narrative, the perspective, if we keep on constantly thinking as a victim, and so we always think that we are getting all of these things that, oh, I'm a loser, la, 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 la. Guess what? You're not helping. The universe is affirming what you're saying. Okay, let me prove that you're right. But if we change our perspective into more uplifting, as what you said, supporting me into what or where am I want to be, then slowly you'll see that, oh, it's not that bad at all. And great example, 2 minutes. That's not bad. Look where we are right now. We're doing this recording and we're having an amazing conversation. So thank you so much for reminder of stop comparing and shift the narrative, and slowly but surely we're getting into that. Now,
it's interesting. It's interesting that the US Marines actually have a little motto, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So, just taking a moment, you're absolutely right. Slow it down for a moment, slow down time. Because time is an internal representation as well. Just slow time down for a moment and go, okay, what do I need to do to get back in the driver's seat, right? Because the moment you start spinning out, and in my keynote speeches, as you know, I speak around the world. I've spoken in 36 countries on 5 continents, and I use the analogy of driving for life. And particularly Formula One racing, right? Yes, you want to go fast, but you've got to slow down in the corners. And if it gets wet on the track, you may need to take the time to go change your tires, because then you go fast. So by slowing down, changing your tires, you're actually going to win the race. And it's not all about just putting your foot on the accelerator. It's not about going as fast as you can. It's about going the appropriate speed for the conditions. And so, I think everybody understands driving as a metaphor. So just make sure you don't spin out on the corners.
Love that. Love that. And this question, I'm super curious how you're going to answer this. Imagine, Andrew, that one of your executive clients asks you to have a talk or speech to young kids, young children as your audience, and talk about life. And after your speech or talk, a 7-year-old kid comes up and say, Mr. Bryant, thank you so much for that wonderful talk or speech that you have given us. But I have a question. What do success in winning mean to you? How would you explain it to a 7-year-old kid?
Success for me is having the freedom to do the things that I want to do and when I want to do them, right? And I take people, success is very generic, but a lot of people talk about success in terms of monetary terms. And so I often talk about, rather than being successful, I say I'd rather be wealthy. And then again, people think about money, but wealth is so much more. I'm looking out of the window here and the sunshine in Portugal. I chose to live here. I live in a lovely house. I've got a swimming pool in my back garden, and I'm 5 minutes from a beautiful beach, and I get to fly around the world and talk to people and do things I want to do. Now, that's not an accident. I was very clear about those things, and I work towards them. And I now have the freedom over my time. So, 7-year-olds understand, you're already successful, particularly if you went to a school that let you play. Lots of research, Finnish schools don't teach maths and science and grammar too early. They let the kids play for a few years and learn how to play. Don't force it down, kids. And just go, just remember when you got to choose who you got to play with, what you wanted to play and how you wanted to play it. That's success. As an adult, we have certain demands on us. We meet a partner, and we then need to learn how do we get along with somebody else when they have things that they want to do that's different. And then we become parents, and then how do we bring up our children? And we need to pay the bills, and we need to earn money, and we need to learn how to do those. So there's lots of learning, but when we do it right, we maintain that ownership of our own life. When we find that we are overwhelmed and we're in comparison, then that's not successful. Now, it's a long answer to a 7-year-old, but taking back to play with who you want when you want to play with it. Now, I don't talk to 7-year-olds, but I have been engaged by organizations to work with at-risk and disadvantaged teenagers. And I've worked with 15-year-olds with gender identity issues, with Tourette syndrome, and who all were in a different culture from the school they were in, and help them get a sense of ownership, self-esteem, and then self-confidence, and the ability to have a voice. And one of those freedoms is the ability to say what you think, and to say what you feel. And so much in the world right now is about you want to be able to have that freedom to have a voice. And if you talk to people who have got something stuck inside them and they can't say it, they're not living a successful life.
Is it the same?
Is it the same as well?
The winning.
Well, you've got to define winning. I mean, in a 100-meter race, it's fairly binary, right? The person that crosses the line first is the winner, right? When I was growing up, there was a bumper sticker that said, he who dies with the most toys wins. But how many people do we talk about who discover minimalism and discover that all the cars, the money. In fact, I was sharing the stage with a speaker I didn't know, and we became very good friends. We were in a city in the Middle East, and we got talking. And he said, "Look, I had the Porsche and the Maserati, and I had the nice house, and I was deeply miserable. So just collecting things isn't it, right?" Now, a 7-year-old isn't going to understand that. They're not going to understand that they've been influenced by materialism and the sense of self-esteem. So, I'm trying to answer the question as you asked it to a 7-year-old. I mean, the topic and the research around self and taking ownership, it needs a little bit more of a maturity around it. But for a 7-year-old, it's doing what you want, with whom you want, and how you want to do it.
Awesome. Yeah. I think the reason why the question behind it's the demonstration from the parents, right? Most kids will look into. That's why I think the curiosity of kid would ask, what is really winning and success? Because majority of parents, and I have come across with this research, it's from Harvard. And they said that many parents being asked kids being asked what actually most important for them. Is it being kind or being successful? Finish the school. And for many of the parents, for many of the kids actually answered, it's to be successful than to be kind. So that's another level of conversation. But I think I'm sorry, that's a false dichotomy. And if that was I haven't read that piece of research, but I would say that, I mean, you're doing a binary value, which is better to be successful or be kind. I mean, firstly, the premise is that you can't be both,
right? Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have given a lot of their money away, right? So they can be kind because they were successful, right? My ability to help my neighbor is there, and I do pay it forwards in a number of ways. But my philanthropy pales into insignificance of if I was a billionaire. I could give a lot more and do a lot more. So, forcing a 7-year-old into a value dichotomy between kindness and success, sets up the premise that they are mutually exclusive. And I argue against the premise. I think you can be kind and successful. And I think being successful, to the point of my new speaker friend, who was miserable because he was focused on the success and not on his relationships. Yeah. And so, a 7-year-old isn't going to understand that. What parents need to instill in their children is a sense of value. What are the values? Beauty, altruism, generosity, humility. You started with your opening question, and what was your humble beginnings? What is humility? And a success is a well-lived life. Success, Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind, right? At the end of your life, if you look back, is this something you can be proud of? This will be your legacy. Did you make mistakes? Of course you did, but did you overcome those? Did you build relationships? Did you make somebody else's life better? So those are the things that we need to have discussions with our children about, not a binary between success and kindness. I would refute that.
I love that. It's always great to challenge, right? Every research. That's why we have every reasons or every justification is valid, because we are all different. But what is the outcome that we want to see, right? And so you've covered many of the practices or routines or habits that perhaps I assume that keeps you moving forward. But the next question I'm about to ask you is something that very important for me, is being optimistic. So I'm super curious, what are those routines or habits or rituals that you do that help you to keep moving forward each day?
Well, I hear two questions in that. So in my 2012 book, so I've written 4 books. I'm working on my 5th right now.
Wow.
The 2012 book on self-leadership was my 2nd book. And in that, there's a section on realistic optimism. So, when I studied psychology in the 80s, we were still in the very dark psychology. We looked at psychopathy. And then in the 90s, there was this shift to positive psychology. And the pendulum swung a little bit too far, because you got this, everybody was into happiness and optimism. And then a whole bunch of research came out that said optimistic people make terrible decisions. And there's a great book by somebody I like to read, and his book is called The Upside of the Dark Side, because we need a level of pessimism to make good decisions, right? Because somebody phones you up and says, you've won $5 million, give us your bank account details so we can deposit it. Are you going to give them your bank account details? Well, there's a level of cynicism and pessimism that says this is likely a scam, right? So otherwise you go, oh, I won $5 million. Here's my bank account details. And then lo and behold, they've cleaned out your bank, right? So we need a realistic optimism. And my self-leadership is very much grounded in Stoic philosophy.
Okay.
And the Stoics look at it this way, that you need to accept reality, however unpleasant, however bleak. You have to accept it without losing the faith that you will prevail. So this is realistic optimism. Sometimes things go wrong. My computer crashed today really badly, and I had to uninstall and reinstall and do a whole bunch of stuff. And I had a bunch of things I would have much rather been doing than fixing my computer, but I was the only one that could do it. But that happened. I accepted it. It happens. Computers do this every now and again. And so I didn't lose the faith that I'm going to solve the problem and I'll come out the other side in time for this interview. Right? I'm not like, oh, it's all going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. No, it's not all going to be fine. You've got to do backups, right? If you say everything's going to be fine, you're going to lose your data. If When I go to Brazil, if I go to Rio, I take my watch, my rings, and my mobile phone and leave it in the hotel room, because I could go, oh, I'll be fine, and somebody's going to steal my stuff, right? So I'm sorry, the world is like that. So realistic optimism is saying, okay, I'm going to look for the best outcome, but prepare for the worst. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I look through life. So, what is my practice is celebration. The way you stay positive is to celebrate those micro wins, right? So I can celebrate now the computer's working, and I can feel good about myself. I'm the one that fixed it. And then that's a celebration. So then, otherwise I could spend the whole day complaining about my computer. No, people listening to this say, he has complained about his computer a fair bit. I'm using it as an example. I'm not, there's a difference, right? And the optimism is, hey, I fixed it. I worked through the problem and I came out the other side. And that's the practice. The practice is celebrating the wins, right? Again, it's not just the micro habit, it's the micro celebrations. Because what we know about motivation is motivation doesn't initiate the action. Motivation comes after the action. You don't get motivated to go to the gym. You go to the gym, you feel some gains, and then you feel motivated.
Yes.
Right? Because if you sit on the couch eating chips and go, I'm waiting to be motivated to go to the gym, you're never going to the gym. But if by pure willpower you get there and then you feel a bit better about yourself, that's where the motivation comes. So the motivation comes from the celebrations. I'm getting a bit closer to my goal. It's always the habit that you're looking for, the practice of the strategy is looking for the delta. Don't be overwhelmed by how far you've got to go. Look how far you've come.
Yes.
Right? So, which is why, I'm version 6.3. I'm not complaining about my age. I'm thinking I'm much better than I was at 4.3.
Yeah.
Right? Do I have a couple of aches and pains from, previous injuries? Yes, I do. But I go, okay, how can I moderate my exercise so I can exercise without stirring up my injured shoulder? And so you adapt and move forwards.
And like what you said earlier, it's about the wisdom and the experiences as you evolve, as you expand. Love that. And I know that time is ticking, Andrew. I'm sure you mentioned super excited that you have a new book coming up. And you mentioned also that you're giving keynote speaking. And obviously, you're also an executive coach. You coach a lot of people with incredible methodologies or strategies that you give. So I'm pretty sure many people watching or listening right now, super curious, where can they find you?
Well, the easiest place, I talk about self-leadership and I own the domain, selfleadership.com, one word. And pretty much all the links to everything are there. So from selfleadership.com, you can find my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Andrew Bryant. I'm very active on LinkedIn, just about to hit 30,000 followers this week, I think. So LinkedIn, on Twitter or X, I'm Self-Leadership, and on Instagram, I'm Self-Leadership, and on YouTube, I'm Andrew Bryant. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of free resources on my YouTube and on my LinkedIn. And if you want to get in contact with me on the Self-Leadership website, there's a link to my WhatsApp. And so you can actually get through to me.
That's wonderful to know. And don't worry for what people watching or listening right now. It will be added in the blog, also on the podcast, so you won't miss out. And Andrew, it's amazing to have this opportunity of a lot of different perspective, different narrative. And I think that's really the main purpose of having this conversation, is to challenge our beliefs, our understanding in life in terms of self-leadership and whatever conversation that we're having. So before I let you go, Andrew, I have a last question. And again, I'm super curious what you're going to say about this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah. So Andrew, if today were your last day on earth, what message would you want to leave to us?
I'd probably sing the Bon Jovi song, It's My Life. There's a Natasha Bedingfield song as well, right? It's called Unwritten. And if you've heard that one, your life, it's a new chapter. It's your life, live it. I've lived, and if it's my last life on earth, and I've actually had this experience. So in In 2021, I got a diagnosis that required half of my insides to get removed. Good news, I've come out the other side, but there was a possibility that it was my last day on earth. So I faced this for real. And I've had this reflection. So for me, this isn't hypothetical. It's like, you know what, if I go now, I've lived a good life. I've lived, I've loved, and I've left a legacy. There are people that whose lives I've touched and, are going to go on and continue to do things based on what I've taught them. So I'm okay. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not looking for it anytime soon. I look to be here a long time more, but, I couldn't live, if we lived a life of regret, and it's, the end's going to come. So, live your life, take ownership, don't blame, don't complain, don't play the victim, go live your life.
Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that. And thank you so much for people watching and listening right now. Definitely all the information that you will need to get connected with Andrew will be given in every platform. And until next time, with yours truly, thank you. Thank you so much. Cindy Marie here to empower your life. Thank you, Andrew.
Ciao, ciao.
That's the end of the episode with Andrew Bryant, with lots of great information to process and meditate on. Share your thoughts with us, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share so that we can reach more people to empower lives. Please follow our podcast and leave a review to help our show grow. We're here to serve you the best we can. Until next time, stay optimistic, keep taking action, believe in yourself and your ability to make a difference. You've got what it takes to pursue your dreams and make a positive impact. Keep going and be unstoppable.